Okay. Um, Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending our webinar. I'm about to get started here. Megan, are you on the call and is my screen visible?
Yes, I'm here and we can see your frevvo webinar at ashish.com logged in.
So my projects is visible. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay. So thanks again for attending. What we're going to focus on today is creating an invoice approval workflow with frevvo's version 10 UI. This has been available in the cloud for several weeks, about a month, I think, maybe a little bit more. But very recently, just last weekend, I think, in fact, it was released and made available also to our on-premise customers. So I wanted to, again, walk through some of the new features and capabilities and really focus in on how easy it is to create a workflow, customize that form, the routing, messages, and so on and so forth using the new guided designer that's available in Frevvo v10. We'll also create some business rules and customize the PDF and set up that invoice approval workflow and finally try it out. So the invoice approval is pretty common, something that we really see customers using Frevvo for quite a lot. Purchase orders, employee onboarding, or new hire onboarding, and there are timesheet approvals. There are a wide variety of situations in which customers are using Frevvo to digitize their workflows. The workflow we'll create a pretty simple one. Starts with an employee filling in a form to request approval for one or more invoices. We'll then route that to the employee's manager, that specific person's manager for approval, then to a VP. We'll kind of add a precondition there. So we only need to route for VP approval under certain conditions. For example, let's say the grand total exceeds $10,000, a certain amount. And then finally to finance for payment. So let's jump right into it. I'm not going to worry about any slides or showing you any PowerPoint in this presentation. I've logged in here to my account, just a temporary account here, webinar@ashish.com. And I've got a project. I'm going to create a new project here for testing. I'll create a new project. Just call it webinar. Okay. So there are two ways really in which you can get started with creating your own workflow in Frevvo. You can click this blue plus button over here and you can install a pre-built template. So we have a number of templates here. I think there are roughly 30 or 40 templates for a wide variety of applications. You can filter those by area like finance, human resources, etc. And you can also search here. So if I type invoice in here, you can see that it narrows down to invoice approval processes. You can click install on one of these templates and you'll see that it installed a basic invoice approval process. Click into the process over here that was the workflow that was installed, and you'll see that a workflow invoice manager review, et cetera, has been created for you. Now, this is a fully functional workflow. You can click on this magic wand here and try it out, run the workflow, and it'll route and get started with some sort of invoice approval, customize this form and this workflow later to meet your needs. But what most customers want, we see most customers doing, is they want to create their own workflow, something that's custom to their business, their organization got a way of doing it today. So let's try and create a workflow completely from scratch. And that's the second way to create a workflow here. Again, click this plus button and click on the create a new workflow icon here or menu item there. And you see a wizard pop up. Now in this wizard, we're going to first ask you to give it a name. We'll just call it invoice approval workflow. And then you can optionally enter a description. Now, note that there's a search button here. It's kind of grayed out right now behind that gray thing, but there is a search button here. And we certainly encourage you to enter a meaningful description because the description is used in the search results, and it can help you help you find workflows when your projects and applications get very large. So this is a simple workflow that routes from manager to routes for approval for invoices, something like that, whatever. You can enter anything you want in here. I'm going to click the next button here, and then you come to the next step in the wizard here, and you see the next step here. You simply have to answer a few basic questions about the, essentially the steps in your workflow, and the system will generate that for you. So in our workflow, as we spoke earlier, we're going to start with an employee. So we'll call this step employee. Typically, in the first step, you always want to create a new form because the employee is going to start the workflow by filling out the form. And we're going to add 3 additional steps. I'm going to click this plus button here 3 times. And we've added steps 2, 3, and 4. The second step is manager. The third step is VP. And the final step here is finance. Okay, so we've by default, we're gonna make all of these approval steps. Of course, you can create a new form at any step in the middle if necessary, but we're creating a workflow that starts with one form and then routes for approvals. Now you can assign this to an email address, to a user, or to a role. For now, I'm just going to leave this at email address, and by default, it's going to put the email address associated with your account, and we'll modify that later to configure a particular the manager step, for example, to route to my manager, and the VP step to route to the VP, and so on and so forth. So for now, I've simply left it as email address. So it's easy to try out. I'm going to click finish here, and you'll see that the workflow has been generated for us. Okay, so here's the workflow. It's going from, as we said, it's going to route from employee to manager to VP to finance step. One of the nice things in this updates in this designer here is when you click on the step over here, the settings panel for that step opens up to the side rather than in a pop-up at the top. This is something that a lot of customers and our own client services team requested. It's also much easier to flip back and forth between steps rather than popping the dialog down, popping it back up, and so on and so forth. You can always dismiss this by clicking that X button here and come back to just the basic workflow. Now at the top here, you'll see there's a panel, a guided designer panel over here. And that panel basically lets you flip back and forth, switch easily back and forth between the various aspects of designing a workflow. Now there's the flow itself. Most workflows have a form. You click on the form over here, you'll see that the form that's associated with that workflow, we only have one form in this particular workflow, loads. Many of you, I think you're already familiar with this form designer. If you've used Frevvo before, this hasn't really changed fundamentally, except it's easier to get to it, to switch back and forth with it. You see here that the wizard has generated a section we called it My Items. There's a little message up here. There's a first name, a last name. There's a manager ID here. This is an interesting field. It's called manager ID, and we'll see soon that there's also a business rule that's been created, and that business rule is going to initialize this manager ID field automatically to my manager. And we'll use that later to route the second step, the manager approval step, to my specific manager. Email, date, signature. So a section called My Items, and then it's also down below, we've generated manager, VP, and finance approval sections, just so essentially one section for each step in the workflow, because that's what we specified in the workflow. We've also created a signature and a date button for each one of those. Now the wizard's certainly capable of generating both this kind of signature as well as a digital signature, a PKI encrypted digital signature component in there. We'll show you it's generated this kind of signature because we specified that it was routing to an email address, but I'll add throw in a digital signature somewhere along the way so you can see what's going on over there. If I click on the rules tab here, you'll see that the wizard's also generated a bunch of rules. So here's an example. This is a rule to initialize those fields in that My Items section at the top. So if you click on this, you'll see that the rule builder pops up. Again, a very visual way to create this kind of very dynamic business logic. So it shows you that when the current step is employee, it's going to set first name, last name, etc., using a variety of functions. Lots of functions are available in the rule builder to my first name, my last name, my email address, and this particular one is important. It's going to set it to my manager ID. We'll be creating a rule later on as well, just so you can see how easy it is to use this rule builder wizard. Okay. The nice thing here is the wizard generated a lot of rules over here that kind of take away the tedious steps. So very commonly, if you'll see over here when we run this workflow that when I'm in the employee step, the manager, VP, and finance sections are automatically hidden. When I navigate to the manager step, the manager section shows up. And all that is encoded in these business rules, and it's done automatically for you, so you don't have to worry about it. The next step, if you will, in that guided designer is the PDF mapping section. It's not really going to be used or relevant in this invoice approval workflow, but it's certainly very useful in other situations like a new hire onboarding, for example. Let's say you bring on a new employee, they fill out their form, their onboarding paperwork, or if you will, online. Yeah, they fill out online forms to provide their personal information, tax withholding information, eligibility, etc. And then the system can map those fields from the form to, for example, a federal or state W-4, a federal I-9 form, or various government regulatory forms, and generate specific PDFs for you. And you can insert those PDF mappings right here. And then finally, we have the settings tab here. And these are really the settings for the entire workflow. There are a lot of settings in here, and we'll go through a few of these as we go along here. And for now, we'll just leave all of this at the default. We'll come back and customize a couple of these in a few minutes. Now, one thing I wanted to note also is that this workflow that's been generated by the wizard is fully functional. We haven't made any changes over here. You can try it immediately. You can just click on this little wand icon here, and you'll see that the form loads. You'll see that the first name, last name, manager ID, email, date have been pre-populated by that business rule. Notice that manager, VP, and finance section are indeed hidden, as I had mentioned earlier. I can click on the signature button and sign, click done. And when I click continue here, you see that the invoice approval workflow was sent for approval. Now we sent it to the we routed the approval by email. So I've got an email here. Sorry, it's on the wrong screen. I'm going to bring it in here. You see that an email was sent to me with a link. I can click on that link and access that invoice approval workflow. Now you'll see here that the manager, it's now in the manager step. So the manager section, approval section is now visible. I can type something. We need this. Click on that approval signature, sign again as the manager. The date got automatically filled in. Click continue, and now it's gone off to the VP for further approval. Okay, so obviously from the VP to finance and on is very much the same approach. So now let me go off and let's go off and customize this workflow, the basic workflow that the wizard has generated, because obviously your workflow is going to be a little bit different from what was generated for you. So let's start first with the form. So I'm going to click on the forms tab here, and let's modify it a little bit. We can do all kinds of things over here. Something simple we could do is drag in a message control here, just make it a little nicer. So I'll just call this invoice approval. Make it none over here. Let's center it. Let's make it bold. Let's make it large. So at least, we've got a little bit of a header over here. You can also add your own logo, other, instructions, address, whatever else you might want in here as well. Now, obviously, this is an invoice approval workflow, and there are no invoices in here. Typically, you would expect to have an invoice in here. So I'm going to drag in a section. So you can see how easy it is. You just drag and drop. The big green arrow shows you where that section is going to drop. So I'm going to drop it below the My Items section that was created for me. Now I'm going to rename this to, let's call it Invoices. Let's drag in a control here. We'll call it Vendor. Or payee, let's call it payee. Click on that style tab, and let's make that a little less wide. We'll also make it required. You'll see that when I made it required, it turned yellow over here. There are these decorators that are available to you as well. Sometimes it's nice, makes it look a little bit nicer. Click industry, see it changes the icon over here. Nice to have a pretty icons. People like seeing those, and sometimes they can be meaningful and helpful. So for example, the email address or the phone will have a phone icon and so on and so forth. Now, in addition to that, we want the invoices. So I'm going to drag and drop a table. So here's the table that got dropped in here. The first thing in an invoice is typically a date. So I'm going to drag a date and drop it in here. We'll call this, say, the invoice date. We don't need this column, so let's remove this. This one is invoice. We'll call it a description. And then the last thing in here is going to be an amount. So find the money control. Here's money. Let's drag and drop that in here. We'll rename this to the amount. And this is essentially the amount of the invoice. We don't need this column in here. Okay, so now we've created a table. It has 3 columns: an invoice date, description, amount. Obviously, you can create tables with as many columns as you want. You can resize and shape them however you want as well. The properties of this table itself, when you click on the table here, oops, I guess I didn't click on the table itself. The table here, you can name this table whatever you want. It's not strictly necessary because the table itself, the outer table itself, is not really visible. But it's always nice to give things, a meaningful name. Let's change the minimum to 1. So you have to, in order to submit this form, you have to have at least 1 invoice. You can have a maximum of 10 in here. And then let's go into each of these fields over here and make them required. That one's already required, and set them to be required. So what we've done over here is we've created a table which allows you to specify at least 1, up to 3, up to 10 invoices, and for each invoice that you specify, you must have the date, the description, as well as the amount. Okay. Now, in addition to that, I'm going to add a grand total in here. A grand total, and once again, let's make that a little bit smaller, something like that. And we're going to compute the grand total automatically by adding the amount fields in here. So I'm going to disable this so people don't accidentally enter any data into that. They can't enter data into that field because it's going to be pre-computed. So we've added a grand total. Let's see, what else can we add in here? I did want to remind you again, there's this manager ID over here. We're going to use that a little bit later. And then I guess I'll add one more. I'll add an attachment, drop an upload control in here and say, I don't know, you can attach supporting docs, something like that. And again, for this upload control over here, you see there are a lot of parameters. You can basically restrict the types of files that are uploaded, the minimum number of attachments, the maximum number, the max size, what is the name of the file, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff that can be done in here as well. Now, one other thing I'll do while I'm here is in this invoices section, I'm going to add a digital signature. Remember, we talked about how the wizard has added, essentially a signature where you just click on it and sign, as you saw me do earlier. But there's another type of signature available. On sections, you can click on the security tab here, and I'm going to select, say, text signature and must sign. You'll see over here this sign this section button has appeared down below. When we try this form and run it, this is going to generate a real PKI encrypted signature that locks the data in the form. It's based on the data in the form, and you can use this signature to ensure that the data in the form has not been tampered with. And we'll see how that works in just a few seconds. Okay. Now, we talked about that grand total. We added that grand total because we wanted to create a business rule essentially that automatically computes the grand total by adding these amounts. So let's pop over to the rules tab. I'm going to click plus over here. Let's create that rule, calculate grand total. Click on this run builder and you'll see the visual rule builder pops up. Now this particular rule does not have any condition. We always want to compute a grand total. We don't want to do it conditionally. So you can leave the conditions tab empty. I'm going to click next over here and let's see, we want to set the grand total to, oops, not to disabled, to the sum. So we're going to use the sum function over here. The sum of the I think I called it amount. Yes, the sum of the amount. The sum of the amount field over here. All right. Okay. Sorry about that. Fat fingering a little bit over here. So pretty simple. We're just going to set the grand total, the sum of the amount field. And I click finish over here. You'll see that that's all I needed over here. If you really want, you can click on this rule code button here, and you can see that behind the scenes, there's all kinds of codes, JavaScript code, for loops, and so on and so forth that's been generated, but we really don't have to worry about it. You can just use the visual rule builder to calculate grand totals, subtotals, hide, show and hide things, enable, disable. There's a lot of stuff you can do with these business rules. Now, we're not going to have a lot of time to go through too much of that functionality. There's a lot of information on our website, and we're going to be having another webinar in the near future that's completely focused just on this business rules piece. One other thing you can do in this new version here is you can actually drag and drop to rearrange these rules. So, for example, I can take this grand total and move it down below the initialize business rule. I just like to have them organized this way: the initialize rule up top, and then the rules corresponding to each step down below. But you can organize these rules however you want. Okay. Let's see. So what we've done so far is we've customized this form. We've added a new section for invoices that has a table. We've created a grand total and added a business rule to compute that grand total. We added a digital signature. What else can I do? Well, let me do a couple of other little things over here. I can click on this messages over here and uncheck printable here. And the reason I'm doing this is eventually we will generate a PDF that off the invoice itself. At the end of once all the approvals are completed, we can generate a PDF and email it to the original employee who requested that. But this is extraneous information in here, and you can use this printable property to print or not print anything that you want on the form. You can also, by the way, change that by using business rules. The other thing we'll do is we'll go to this manager section here, and we'll add a special CSS class here. We'll just basically type in page break in here, because what we want to do here is start this on a new page. So what's going to happen here is that the top part is going to print on page 1, and the bottom part is going to print on page 2. Okay. So I think that's enough customization. Hopefully you get the idea. If you look at the palette over here, there are a lot of controls, a rich palette of over 25 controls in here, and you can really essentially create any form that you might want to use for your business requirements. So now let's hop back over to the workflow and start customizing the workflow along the lines that we want over here. So several things you can do here. Let's start with really just this continue label here. Instead of by default, it's going to say continue, but it's always better to have meaningful labels for your buttons down below. So for example, at the employee step, you might say send to manager. So now when the employee is filling out the invoice form, the button down below will say something meaningful. Switch over from the manager to, I don't know, approve invoice. On the VP step, we might say send to finance. And on the finance step, we might say finish invoice, whatever, something along those lines. Again, you can see how easy it is to switch back and forth between these tabs and or between the steps in the workflow. So it's quickly customize the same field for each step. Now let's switch over to the manager and pop over to this assignment tab here. Now this is where we specify the routing for a particular step. Now remember that we originally in the wizard said we're just going to route to by email, no login required, completely anonymously. But we really want to route this to the employee's manager. Now remember when we were in the form, I mentioned that manager ID field had been created. So what we can do here is use a template. So start typing, and you'll see that Frevvo shows you what are the possible completions over here. We know we got a field here called manager ID. You select that. We can remove this email from the assignment. And what this means now is that this step is going to be routed not to an email address, but to this specific user. Of course, the specific user is dynamic. We don't know who that user is. It's going to depend on who the employee is. But the system knows that if Ashish is the employee starting out, Ashish's manager is Megan, it will automatically fill Megan in here. Now, there's a task notification email that gets sent out. So when that workflow routes to the manager gets notified that there's some sort of approval needed. There's some defaults put in here, but we're going to customize those a little bit. So rather than type, I'm going to copy paste from a file that I have here. And you'll see that the actual, both the message as well as the subject also are using templates so that the email and both the subject as well as the content of the email are meaningful and dynamic. So this is going to say invoice submitted by the actual employee's first name and last name for manager approval. And the message in here is also going to be dynamic. It also contains a link in here. This is a special frevvo template that's available to all of these steps, and it lets you basically provide a link, hyperlink, using which the manager can just click right there and approve the or go to the form in order to approve the invoice. Now, many times customers also use what we call spaces. Spaces are just portal. It's a built-in portal that's available in Frevvo. It's included in both cloud as well as on-premise versions of Frevvo. And you can, instead of providing this link, you can go to you can direct the manager to the portal where they can view their task list and view all the invoices waiting for their approval. We'll take a quick look at that task list in a second here. Okay. Let's do the same thing for the VP. Now, again, remember in this case now, instead of routing to a specific user, we're going to route to a role. So again, just start typing VP, and the role called VP is visible. The email address is not going to be relevant in this case again. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll change the subject and the message just so that they're a little bit more meaningful. Okay, so very similar to the previous step, just invoice submitted was for VP approval and a message with a link to approve that. And then, for completeness sake, we might as well do the same thing for finance. I'm going to leave the routing in the finance step by email because there's, you get the idea. You can route to a user, you can route to a role, or one or more roles actually, or one or more users, and you can route by email as well. So what we've done here now is we've set up the assignments in the workflow for the manager, the VP, as well as the finance steps. Okay. After having customized the form, we've set up the routing. The next thing that we want to do here is go back in and configure these messages. Let's take a look at this tab over here. We're in the manager step here, and there's 3 types of messages in here. So this task information is really what's visible in your task list. So, you want to have something meaningful in here, because if you have 30 or 20 or whatever n number of workflows in your task list, you want the manager or whoever's looking at that task list to know what the heck each one of these is about. And again, use templates. Using templates, you can make the data, the little blurb that's displayed in your task list meaningful. And we'll again, when we go to the task list for the manager, we'll see you're going to see invoice from blah blah blah. The pending message is what's displayed on the screen when the workflow routes to this step. So when the employee clicks send to manager, instead of just seeing a default message, your request was processed or something like that, they're going to see your invoice was sent to your manager for approval, whatever you want. You can customize this, make it as detailed as you want. Again, it can also be templatized using any of the controls in the form. And the history message is what you see in the audit trail. So this is optional. Once again, you can leave it blank, you can leave it at the default. But again, when you look at the audit trail, when later on you go back and look at the audit trail for a particular invoice, it's nice to see what happened. And every step in the audit trail, the history message allows you to provide custom information for that particular step. So for the manager step, we've set up all these things. Let's quickly zip through and basically do the same thing for the VP step as well. It'll just take me a couple of seconds here. To finance and put the exact same thing. The pending message for the VP is going to be your Invoice was sent to the VP for approval, and the history is that it was approved. And finally, in the finance step, we'll do the same thing. And that the payment was processed. Okay. Okay. So what have we done? We've configured the workflow steps. We've routed them as we want according to our requirements. The routing to the manager, to the VP, and to the finance, and we've also configured the messages for all of these things. Let's do a couple of other things. Remember when we started this, when we were talking about this, we said that the VP only needs to approve if the amount is greater than $10,000. So how to do that? We click the little plus over here and click on Add Precondition, and you'll see a precondition wizard pop up. So let's give it a name, amount greater than 10,000. This is just a description that's going to appear, a user-friendly description that's going to appear in the workflow. You'll see it in a second. Click on Edit here, and you'll see the same rule builder, visual rule builder pop up. We're going to add a condition. You have to have a condition. So when do we want this to happen? When the grand total is more than 10,000. And that's it. You can add any number of conditions you want and a logical expression, both have to be true, either one of them to be true, or any logical expression for that. And I click OK over here, click Submit, and you'll see now that the workflow is showing the precondition. So we're going to go from employee to manager. Then we're going to evaluate, is the amount greater than 10,000? If the answer is no, skip VP and go straight to finance. Otherwise, the VP approval is also required. Okay, very simple, very easy to create these preconditions, widely used by customers in workflows as well. Okay, let's do one other thing that is very popular among customers, and that's to add a notification after a specific step. You can add notifications after every step. So we'll do it after manager over here. We'll call it a send email. And we want to send this, where do we want to send the email? We want to send it to, who do we want to send it to? We want to send it to the original requester, I think, right? So we want to send it to the email address of whoever requested this, and we'll basically call it something like that. So this just basically lets the original requesting employee know that their invoice was indeed approved by the manager. Now, you don't have to do this because the audit trail captures this, and the employee can always go to the audit trail and check it out, look at the status of their invoice. Where is it? Is it pending for the manager? Is it pending, whoever it's pending for at this particular point in time? But it's nice to get an email notification, and it's completely optional. Some people don't like getting unnecessary email, and if you don't want to get those emails, no problem. Just you don't have to add these emails to the workflow as if you don't want them. But some customers like to have that, and so you have the option of sending an email as well. Now, in addition to sending an email after every step, you can also add a webhook. So you can essentially send an HTTP post out to your own web service. And sometimes customers use this to to instrument the workflow for their own database or things of that nature, whatever they might want to do. So we're now sending a notification once the manager approves. If the amount is greater than 10,000, we're going to route to the VP. Otherwise, we're going to skip that. So I think that's, I can't think of anything else I want to configure in the workflow itself. So let's pop over. We already looked at the form. We already looked at the rules. We don't really have any PDFs to map in here. So let's pop over here to the settings tab and take a look at some of the things that you can do when you're, these are workflow level settings. So one of the first things I'll do is I'll click Save PDF here. When Save PDF is checked, and the PDF image, the PDF document that's generated after the workflow completes will be automatically saved to the repository. You can name this PDF whatever you want. I think you can use, first name. I don't know, something like this. So you can name the PDF whatever you want. I'm also going to check the save load button over here. What this does is it lets you as a user, say, or the employee, you're filling out the form, you put in the first invoice, but you're waiting for the second invoice. It's going to show up a little bit later. You can save this to your own task list and come back to the invoice approval and fill in that second invoice at a later date and then send it off for approval over here. Several other things you can do over here. Here's another example. You can basically deploy this to production right here. So that just removes the watermark and deploys this workflow for production use. So we don't have time to go through every single thing in here. Again, as I mentioned, it's documented in great and gory detail in our documentation. And of course, we're here to answer any questions if you want. Let's look at the access control tab here. This allows you to really specify permissions and access control, provide fine-grained access control to various things that can be done with the workflow. So for example, who can start the workflow? Well, anyone, login not required. You can switch to just authenticated users. So only somebody who's logged in to this particular account tenant in your frevvo system can actually start this workflow, and then you can set it to the designer only. This is something you do during testing and design during the design process, or you can click custom and specify exactly which subset of users and roles can start this process. We'll leave it at anyone for now. And really, pretty much the same thing is possible for any of these permissions. Who can edit, who can view the submissions, who can edit them, and so on and so forth. You can specify with fine-grained detail who can do any of these things. On the Messages tab, there are these default task info and pending messages for the workflow level settings. And these basically apply if you haven't set them up for each individual step. We already did these for individual steps, as you may recall, and the step level settings will override the workflow level settings, but you can also set defaults right here for the entire workflow. Let's pop over to this Workflow Actions tab over here. And in the Workflow Actions tab, really what this allows you to do is set up what the user is going to see on the screen when the workflow completes. So this is just a message that's displayed. So typically you want to show something meaningful in here. So we'll show something like this. So thank you, we emailed somebody, whoever the original requester, to let them know the invoice was successfully processed. So you can set up whatever you want in here. Once again, everything is totally customizable. And instead of displaying a message, you can certainly forward users to a web page and post data to your web page and forward users to the response as well. Now that's the success case. It can also obviously be the error scenario. Let's say something went wrong and there was an error. Sometimes it's nice to let people know that. Well, usually it's nice to let people know that. So you can display a message of on the screen saying that you were unable to send that email, and maybe the person who's finishing the workflow should let the original employee know that their invoice was indeed processed. So workflow actions workflow actions let you define what the user sees on the screen. In contrast, you have document actions, and document actions allow you to determine or configure what happens to the actual data, and these can be configured independently. A lot of things you can do: save to file system, and from there into a document management EDM system, SharePoint, Google Drive. You can also send an email, which is something we can do pretty easily. So let's do that. So we're going to send it to the email address of the original requesting employee. And let's set up a quickly say, what do we want the subject to be? Some sort of final status update and the message. And then let's make sure that we send a PDF snapshot here. Let's include all the attachments that were added into the form as well. The PDF snapshot is simply the generated PDF document for the that's auto-generated by Frevvo. Remember, we put in a page break and added a little invoice approval header up top. Let's also go in and configure that PDF a little bit. But real quick, again, in the document action, there's a lot more you can do over here. You can do really very customized things in here for very advanced behavior. So you can send individual documents in the form to individual endpoints or individual backend systems. We won't have time to go through all of that. today, but there's a lot of functionality available here. And finally, in the Styles tab here, you can also configure a variety of things. So let's set up a couple of margins. And then I'm going to add a simple little footer down here. And this is just a template again, built-in template that's just going to print the page number for me. Okay, so we've done quite a bit of customization. We generated the workflow using the wizard. We customized the form to meet our needs, the workflow and its routing and messages, added a business rule, set up some settings, configured some settings over here. Let's give it a shot. I'm going to click on the little wand over here to try it out again. Hopefully I didn't make any mistakes in there. You can see that the information up top is filled in as always. I'm gonna click on the signature tab and put this here. Now, typically you wouldn't have a signature here and a signature there. You would incorporate it all into one, but I'm just gonna ignore that for now. The invoice date is, let's say it's today's date, has red widgets, and it was for 1,200 bucks. Let's add a second invoice and make the amount exceed $10,000. So have these expensive blue widgets. So because the amount now, the grand total you see here is $15,700, you'll see that the system should route it also to the VP. Click on add files, choose files, and you can choose this is an image over here. I'll just add it over here. You can upload any number of documents you want in here. Now, if you're using this on your cell phone, doing this on your mobile device, when you clicked on that add files, you would be able to use the camera to take a picture. Remember this sign this section button? I can click this over here. You can see that the entire section got grayed out. I can't really change anything in here. My first name, last name, and the date was automatically inserted, meaning that this section is now locked, and any changes or tampering to this will turn this this banner down here red. I'm going to click on send to manager. See that the message that we configured has indeed been displayed, and I did get that email as we had configured, saying, you know, workflow notification. You can see that the email has a meaningful subject and message, and then there's a link to access this invoice. Now, in this particular case, since I'm in another tab here, I am actually logged in as the manager, Jim Kirk. You can see that the task list here is showing me my invoice approval workflow. If you click on this, you'll see the audit trail saying that it was processed by the employee and it's now locked for the manager. I can click on the play icon here. You'll see that same invoice approval showed up. It's at $15,700. I can see these two things, but the manager icon is now visible. I can say, looks good, click on the approval signature, sign it, and approve the invoice. You'll see that the message that we wanted here, your invoice was sent to the VP for approval, was indeed displayed. I'm going to log out and log in as the VP. And you'll see the exact same task list with the audit trail showing now that it was also processed by Karen. I can click on that play button again. This time the manager section is also visible or collapsed, but you can see it over here. And again, I'm going to sign as the VP. Sorry, I'm not very good with signing with my mouse. Click on send to finance. If you recall, on the finance side, we only got the we set it up to route automatically by email. And indeed, I got this email saying one or more invoices have been approved for payment. Here's the link. I'm going to click on the link over here. The entire invoice is visible. You can open this up and see that the manager looks good. The VP looks good. Sign it off. And click on finish invoice. And you'll see that the message that we said that we emailed Jim Kirk to let them know that their invoice was successfully processed has been displayed. Now, in the interim here, I also did get this intermediate message saying that the invoice was approved by your manager. Remember, we set up that notification after the manager step to let the employee know that the invoice was indeed approved. And then here's the final status message. Okay, maybe we'll view this as an icon. Uh, you'll see that the attachment, in this case, an image is attached, and here's the PDF. If we open up this PDF, we'll see that it indeed is, has those margins. You can see the first page and the page number down below with the invoice details, and page 2 has all the approvals, including the signatures displayed on the screen. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a pretty good idea of how easy it is to use Frevo to create these create an invoice approval, or really any workflow that you want using Frevo's guided designer. So that was a quick look. We really started out with a wizard to generate a simple workflow and customized it. We did all of that in roughly 35 odd minutes without really writing a single line of code. So the new guided designer makes it very easy to really flip back and forth between those workflow design screens. And hopefully you agree that it's a lot easier to use and than prior versions, and is in fact something that anyone can use to generate these workflows. So I'll stop there. I know that Megan's on the phone, on the line as well. And Megan, are there any questions that I can answer?
Yeah, and you guys can go ahead and put your questions into the questions panel whenever you'd like. But let's see, we do have one question. So Ashish, we have someone asking on our website, where is the sort of how-to documentation? Where can we find that?
Sure. So there's if you go to our website www.frevvo.com, you can first several things on here. That's a great question. You can click on Try Frevo free here and sign up for a free cloud trial account. That's the first thing. Definitely encourage everybody, just try it out first on the cloud. It's the exact same software. You'll get an idea of how the system works, and without having to go through installation. If you do want to install it, you can click on Products and On-Premise Software, and then click on Download Free. And then there's basically download instructions. You can download the software itself, generate a license key, view the installation instructions, and download various add-on components like the database, SharePoint, file system, and other connectors as well. A few other things in here on our website under resources, there's a page called templates here. And under templates, there are a number of examples: purchase order, new hire onboarding, invoice approval, travel request. And you can simply click on try online here and just try out several of these templates and see, get a real quick idea of the wide variety of things that you can do here with Frevo. And then finally, the documentation itself is on docs.frevvo.com. So if you go to docs.frevvo.com, there's extensive documentation on our website, from quick start videos, tutorials, and other resources in here, and a user guide that tells you how to design, how to use forms and workflows, and a whole wide variety of features and functionality that's available in Frevo. And then the last thing is also right under here under resources, our support site. So you can go to support.frevvo.com. We've got a support portal. You can post your question, look at forums for common answers, subscribe to the support forum to get updates, and so on and so forth. Okay, I think that was a question. Hopefully I answered it.
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
Okay.
The next question we have is, how would you assign multiple tasks but keep the workflow going until the rest of the form or flow is completed by the user? I think this is kind of a parallel tasks question.
Yeah, I guess I don't have time to fully answer this question over here. You actually might know more about this, Megan, than I do. I think you go to this in our documentation here, search for patterns. You look at workflow design patterns here, and you can see in here that there are a wide variety of workflow design patterns that we've documented. So as you scroll down through here, you'll see that there are somewhere in here. I know I saw the it's probably, yeah. So you can see how to do it from go to step two, and then come back to step 3. Now this is a little bit to be completely honest, this is a little bit tricky to do. It's not something that's as visual and as easy as creating a workflow that we've shown you over here. Obviously, you can also assign to multiple people using a role. If you've got multiple people in a role, it will go to everybody's inbox in that role. Um, and I think there's also the save to user and save to role capability functionality that I didn't have a chance to show you today. So I can get the workflow in my inbox, and then instead of forwarding it to the next person, I can assign it to another user, or I can assign it to another role as well. So maybe contact us, and we'll set up a session where we can kind of walk you through how to do some of those things.
Okay, super. We have a couple questions about the recording, which I think you'll have available for all registrants after. And then we also have a question, where do I see the submission data and can I like run reports on that?
Yes. So I guess this is the workflow I created over here. Now you can go in here and you can click on this View Submissions tab over here. Obviously, it's going to be a little limited right now because I just created this. I only have 2 submissions. But here's the one that we just submitted over here. Um, you can basically filter these submissions by a variety of criteria as well. And click on that submission over here. You'll see that all the images, the attachment, the PDF of the form, as well as the XML data representing the document that was submitted are all saved over here. So this is a submission repository that's built into Frevvo. Um, it's a good opportunity for me to tell you about dashboards and reporting. We're in the middle of building very sophisticated dashboards. Let me see, I have a mini screenshot somewhere here. So this is not yet available. We're building it. We hope to have it sometime later this year, maybe by summer, by late spring, summer, where you'll be able to really create a dashboard, sophisticated dashboard with tables, pie charts, bar charts, all kinds of widgets that you can see here in the dashboard palette, but really using almost exactly the same design experience. So just like designing a form where you're dragging, instead of dragging and dropping text fields and sections, you can just drop in charts. You can also apply rules, map the dashboard to a PDF, and settings a very, very similar design experience. So not quite ready to unfortunately show this to you as yet. We kind of expect to be able to do a webinar on this upcoming feature in maybe a couple of months time frame to give people an early look at that as well. But we're very excited about this upcoming feature. There's several other features that are coming shortly as well. Another important one that lots of customers have asked for is versioning, where you'll be able to create a workflow, uh, update it to a new version, but let the older versions of that workflow the in process instances of that workflow still continue to use the older version, so there's no incompatibility introduced. Okay.
Super. And last question is, how do I integrate with my database, or is there other integration options?
Sure. So there are a lot of integration options, and database integration is a very common one. Let's see. There's probably the best thing to do is on the database side. There are 2 things I'll point you to. There on in our documentation under resources in-depth tutorials, there's a database connector tutorial that really walks you through in great and gory detail how you integrate with the database. You can also go to our website on that resources templates page here. You can click on this database and you can actually try some database integration. So here's an example of a form that's connected live to a SQL database running on our servers. This list of customers has been automatically populated from the database. Hard to tell, but it did come from the database. Now, when I select this customer, you can see a list of orders. I select an order, you'll see the order details populate below. Select another order, you'll see that it instantly populates down below. I select another customer, you get a different list of order details, select that order, and so on and so forth. And the best part is all of this is done without writing any code. You don't have to know how to, HTML, JavaScript, none of that code, XML, none of that stuff is required. So for database integration, there's a lot of power, a lot of capability that Frevo provides, again, contact us. And can't really answer that question in a couple of minutes, other than to say that yes, you can integrate with your database in very powerful ways using Frevo.
All
All
right.
right.
I think that was it for questions. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you again, everybody, for attending. Appreciate it. And bye for now. We'll share the recording as soon as it's available. Thanks.